Hi, my name's Simon. I just got out of a conversation with a professor at a Bible college about the Paraclete or Parakletos, which we talked about that it was a very inaccessible concept to the average person. And I want to try and rebuttal that by saying that even though it's not an easily accessible academic concept, there are a couple ways that we can go about understanding it. But just to back up, in John and one reference in First John, but in John there are four uses of a word in Greek that roughly it's just the word paraclete, and it's a word that's referencing the Holy Spirit, and it is very, very vague and very, very difficult to access, especially for your average Western reader. But to the readers of the time, with the vernacular and the things they were using, it would have been very easy to access and a lot more readily available. So I kind of want to take, because this is a really, really important passage and concept in John, just take a second to try and make it available to the modern reader. Because there's a couple ways that we can actually, without too much effort, understand what it is that John's trying to say. But in order to do that, you kind of have to understand the setting. This is your passages, chapters 13 through 17 of John, which is where we get the Eucharist from, although that's most of the other Gospels. But yes, Jesus' final dinner with the disciples before he is to be crucified and martyred. And it's really hard for us to understand what's going on here because none of us have ever been in a room with a physical God, right? We've maybe experienced the Holy Spirit, we've studied God, we've studied all these things, but we've never had a tangible physical person that was always accessible, always wise, and in that way. They did. And in order to understand this passage, you have to understand that that is how they based their life around. Their life is based around Jesus as God, as a person with them. And this is about to stop. It's suddenly going to be taken away from them, and Jesus knows that. So in this discourse, you have this incredible shift that's going to happen. He knows that Judas is going to betray him. He knows that most of the disciples are going to stop to believing in a short period of time, and he has to leave them, and he has been their shepherd. He has been virtually their only advocate and all these things. So you have this dinner that is, quite honestly, it's kind of horrible. It's gut-wrenching, and to anyone who cares about these people, this is going to be one of the most difficult things they're ever going to have to go through. And what has been a difficult life previous and going to be a difficult life coming, as a lot of them will be martyred. But we have this, and you put yourself in Jesus' shoes. You're sitting across from them, and you have something to offer them. And what you offer them, you use the word paraclete. And paraclete is going to be the continuation of the ministry that you as Jesus, or what Jesus has done to the disciples. He's saying that even though I am leaving, there is a person, a spirit, that's going to come in and continue the work. So even though all of this is going to happen, and your relationship to God is radically going to change, and there's a lot of things going to be upended, I'm offering you a concept by which my ministry, my companionship, my shepherding of you is not going to stop. And this is the primary thing that he actually offers the disciples, outside of just, I know that it's going to be hard. So this is a really, really key concept. And so when we look at Paraclete, we're looking at something that's very, very rich. It's the absolute continuation of what Jesus has been doing. Obviously, there's many dynamics in many different ways. But if we want to look at those few passages in John in chapters 13, 14, and 17, and a little 16, I think, this is the key thing to understand. And once we kind of have that basis that Jesus is offering something, and this is something that they direly need, then we can take a look at the Paraclete, and it makes a little bit more sense. We don't have a lot of background on the word. It's a lot more accessible to the people of the time. We do know a couple of things. We do know that he would sustain their needs, that he was going to be an advocate, which is in a legal sense. So in situations where you're being tried as a believer, because we can apply this to us now, when you're being tried, this is someone who would come alongside you and make sure that you're well represented, that would make sure you know what to say and all these different aspects. So understanding that if you're going to be tried, the Paraclete is going to come alongside you is really, really a lot of what this is talking about. The other thing is that we're facing this concept of people falling away. And so in that, the Paraclete is also the person that convicts. So if you're facing the concept of, I think I'm going to fall away and I don't know how I'm going to get back, Jesus isn't going to be around, how do we navigate this world without the physical Jesus in front of us? Then Jesus offers the Paraclete, we know as the Holy Spirit, as the person who's going to make sure that that doesn't happen. If you get too comfortable, if you get complacent, if you go wayward, the Holy Spirit is who is going to bring you back on track. So if you ever read through these sections of John, kind of think in the back of your head what would it have been like, because they didn't know the Holy Spirit. They only knew a physical Jesus. And what happens when he leaves? Can we follow again? And their lives were completely different before they came in contact with him. And it's so much of what the last discourse, this farewell right before martyrdom, is assuring them that no matter how it is, God is always going to be accessible to them, that they're going to be sons. So even if the term is confusing and hard to access, I think the nature of it is not. That it is very possible to understand where they're at, and if we just take a moment to realize the severity of their situation, we realize how deep the offering of what the Paraclete is coming from Jesus.